Okay, so so today we're gonna learn about Alamo and we're gonna do it. We're gonna install the Alamo via CocoaPods, right? So in Ruby you have gems, in Mean you have node modules, in iOS you got pods, right? Because I don't know why it's called pods, but
because it's edgy and cool.
Yeah,
because it's chocolate.
Right. So we're gonna take this the demo that we did for yesterday's lecture, right? So remember yesterday, all we did was we used the vanilla kind of Swift syntax to get us a request to the Star Wars API, and we kind of looked into the data that we got back, and then we printed out all of the character names from that JSON object. So today, the goal for this lecture here is to do the exact same thing, but this time instead of doing it the vanilla way, we're just going to do it using Alamo Fire. Right? And I'm going to show you guys how to install Alamo Fire, from scratch, and use CocoaPods. All right, so there we go. See, we did the API call. We got back a list of these names, right? And this code is in yesterday's video. Now, I made a copy of it and I named it API Demo 2, and we're going to edit this guy. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to close the file, right? And close the file, minimize the simulator, and then we're going to put this folder here with our project over here to the side, right? And I'm going to have my little lecture notes over here. And what we're going to do is you're going to have to open the terminal on that folder, right? So open the terminal, API Demo 2. I have a little shortcut key that helped me do that. But the idea is that you're going to install CocoaPods via your terminal, right? So I'm going to send you guys this PDF later with all of the steps, right? So we're going to set up Alamo Fire. There's a link to the Alamo Fire documentation. They have pretty good documentation. It's all like outlined out. In addition to Alamo Fire, they also have like Alamo Fire images and all of this different kind of different frameworks for other things to do. But that's the link up here. So the first thing we're going to do, if you guys have not ever installed CocoaPods before on your computer, you're going to want to run this line, sudo gem install CocoaPods. That's a Ruby command that will install CocoaPods, the tool, on your computer globally. Right? I've already done that, so I'm not going to run that command. For you guys, if you run this one time, it'll work from then on. Right? So once you have that, you're going to be in the directory in your terminal where the project lives, and then you're going to run pod init. Right? Once you run pod init, you see that, boom, there's this pod file that appeared inside of that folder. Now the next step is we're going to open the pod file in a text editor. I'm just going to use Atom, drag the pod file in here, and you see that we have this little pod file here open for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to add all of our dependencies in between under the use frameworks and before the end. Right? So in this case, we're going to have Alamo Fire 4.4. And if you go to the Alamo Fire, the GitHub there, you'll see that the latest version is going to be this guy, pod Alamo Fire 4.4. Right? So whatever this is, and they update this often, we're just going to copy that. I have that here in my notes as well, but it's the same thing. We're just going to copy that, inside of in here. Boom. Once this is copied, we're going to save the file, and then we're going to close it. We're going to close the pod file. Right. Once it's closed, we're going to go back to our terminal, and we're going to run pod install. And it's going to get Alamo Fire 4.4, and it's going to install it in our project. And as you see, it's installing it. We'll get all these extra files. So we have this pods file with all of our pods that we install. CocoaPods will handle this for us. It's very similar to node modules folder that npm does. So once we do that, from now on, we're always going to be editing this guy. So before you were using the blue one. Now every time we're going to work on a project, we're just going to use the white one from now on. Right? So once you open that, it's the exact same thing, but the white one has the dependencies integrated with it. Right? And CocoaPods will build that for you. So what we're going to do After we open this, we're going to do Command B to build. All right, so Command B, and look at on top it says building API demo 1, and it went by really quickly, but in the beginning it said build Alamo Fire. Right, so now if you open this drop down, you should see, well, it's not there, but if you do the Command B, before you would have to link a bunch of things, but Xcode 8, once you install it via CocoaPods, all you need to do is just build the project and it just integrates with your thing automatically. How do I know that it's successfully integrated? I just go to my view controller, whatever view controller, and then I do import Alamo Fire. And if it auto-completes for you, that means it's available, right? So there we go. We have Alamo Fire now available to us. Now the only thing we need to do is import that, right? And then we can use it within our code to do the API calls. Now, yeah.
What if you want, now that you're at this stage, you've opened it up, what if you want to add another pod?
If you want to add another pod, you just open the pod file again, put the dependency in there, in the pod file, you save it, and then you just run pod install again. There's also this command called pod update. The frameworks like Alamo Fire, they'll regularly update their versions, and if you just run pod update in the terminal, it'll just scan all of your pod files and just update them to the latest version. It's really convenient, right? So it works exactly like npm. So if you want open your package.json file, you can add dependencies in there. Exactly the same thing, right? So
if we like copy the project, like making a new folder, just copying it, it won't ruin the dependencies.
If you just copy the whole folder and make a copy, you open it up, it's exactly the same. Yeah. So in this PDF, I've included these two main things that you need to use with Alamo Fire. Obviously, there's a lot more. There's a lot more functionality to Alamo Fire, and it's all described in the documentation. The two main things that you're going to want to use is the GET request and the POST request, which are these two things, right? So let's edit our code here so that we have a different GET request. Instead of this make API call, I'm going to, let's make this a little bigger so you can see it. All right. Let's say instead of make API call, I'm going to not call this guy, but I'm going to call make API call AF, Alamo Fire. All right. All right, so I'm running this function instead of this one. All right, so the first thing we're going to need is, actually, we don't need anything. We just need this Alamo Fire request initializer function, right, that we're going to call. Because we've already integrated Alamo Fire, we can simply go, what was it, alamo-fire.request, right? And we see that it auto-completed for us a bunch of these, different variations there. It looks like this is the one that I want. So I click on that, and with Alamo Fire, they sometimes change up their syntax, which is really annoying because if you change the syntax, all of your code will break if you're using Alamo Fire. So you have to update to the latest version of Alamo Fire, dig into the documentation, see what they changed, and then fix up all that. So when they changed their version, the Word app that I made, it just had a million errors, and half of those were because of Alamo Fire. But it looks like that. Yeah, pretty sweet deal, huh? So it looks like that. This is the latest one. So we got Alamo Fire request. The URL is just going to be this string here. The method is going to be .get. Parameters, no parameters. Right? If we wanted to have parameters, we just make an object, put that object there as the parameters. Encoding, we don't need any encoding. We don't even need this argument here. And then we're going to do headers, no. Okay, once we have that, we're going to do response JSON response in, and then we're going to do stuff, and then we can close out this Almofire request. All right, so this is all we need. And over here, we're going to do the stuff, and we're going to, let's say, if let the JSON result equals to response.result.value as NS dictionary, then we're going to print the JSON result. All right, let's run this. And using one line of code here, 2 lines of code, we did everything that we did with all of that. So
That's way better. You don't have to do all the translations.
well, you're still going to have to try to dig in there and format the data. But right, but now we're just using Almofire to do a lot of this heavy lifting for us. And the good thing about Almofire is that I guess the main benefit of using it would be, one is simplified syntax, but second of all, it actually handles the threading for you. So instead of having to do the dispatch async main every time, Almofire just knows, okay, you got data back, update on the main thread. So it does that for you, right? So over here, we would do the same thing. We got the JSON result as the NS dictionary. That is this guy, right? So then let's do this. We're just going to copy this code that we had from before to get us printing out those names. All right, so we're still going to do some casting for the data, but now if we print it, everything should work like it just did before, with the names printed out. Yeah, there we go. Right? So using Almofire, it's a really kind of, it's a nifty way of doing it using a framework, but at the same time, you don't have to worry about any of the threading and the delayed UI. I believe a lot of companies in the world, they actually use Almofire to handle a lot of the requests on their iOS apps, which is why it's like a huge deal when they change everything. But that's kind of the life we live.
If your app stays on an older version of Almofire, will it still work?
If it's supported.
And the thing is, when they changed from Swift 2.2 to Swift 3, I remember it was like overnight, and then the next day I opened my app, and everything was broken. So every time they do a main change,
Even if it was deployed on your iPhone?
if it was deployed on your iPhone, it wouldn't break. But if you open it up in Xcode, it would break. Yes, because the Xcode is now the latest version of Xcode, and then it's using the different syntax, Swift 2.2 and 3, and then Almofire, because they change the syntax, they have to edit their source code to make it Swift 3. So therefore, it breaks a lot of things. And especially when they have like the function parameters like overloading different, then it causes a ton of different problems. Because it wasn't like this before. It was much more wordy, but they kind of like trimmed it down. So, but it wasn't really that difficult to fix. It was really about just reading the documentation and see what they changed and just conforming to their changes. There's also another version of Almofire called Almofire Images, which is what I used for caching my images for my Star Wars app. I've never used just vanilla Swift to get images before, but I imagine it'd be much harder to do that than with Almofire Images, because the documentation is really clear. Just do that, import that, and then just this is how you use it, right? Again, I'll send you guys this PDF with all this code, and the post request is very similar. You just have some extra parameters in there, and that is it. By end of the day today, we're going to do the final steps, right? That's the goal. And tomorrow we're going to finish up everything in the advanced chapter. And then Thursday will be the catch-up day and also demos if needed. This afternoon I'm going to do one with the to-do list, and I'll have that recorded as well. And the main goal of that is just to get you guys, on the same page in terms of last week's material. Right. Cool.